But without further ado, so tonight we will be meeting with the Department of Permits, Licensing and Inspections, and the Housing Authority will be presenting second. So I will now hand the floor over to Mark Mariani, Assistant Director for the Department of Permit Licenses and Inspections.
Thank you, Molly. You can pass those down. I brought a sheet.
Oh, awesome. Thank you.
So, thank you very much for coming. I've done this presentation 5 or 6 times. We'll probably get to a point where there's so many questions that it will kind of detract from everything. So what I'll do is I'll give you kind of a brief introduction, what I do, kind of how the department is broken down. Molly's going to essentially navigate our department website, which is the best resource for information. We quite literally publish everything in our department. There should be no reason that you're standing on the phone trying to call our department looking for information when we put it all here. Quite literally, everything is on here. If it's not on here, things are processed to here in real time from the field now. So if we have a violation that comes up, it gets logged in, it gets put through, and it gets put on the website. You can go to it and see it. So with that said, let me explain a little bit about my position and how the department is broken down. I'm the Assistant Director of Operations, and operations is maintenance. I oversee all of the maintenance of the built world. That includes property maintenance, city-funded demolition, fire maintenance, occupancy maintenance, building, business, and vendor licensing enforcement. So I say property maintenance, and everything comes to mind. Oh, I can't wait to turn in my neighbor. So we'll talk about that as well. I know everybody's like, oh, I can't wait. He's going to talk the whole time, or I'm going to let this person have it next door to me. To give you a little bit of scope on that, I oversee property maintenance, city-funded demolition, fire inspections, and business licensing and occupancy inspections. About each one of those, I will explain. So the department is broken down into 3 units: operations, construction, finance, and business licensing. I'm in operations. Under construction are where all the building permits are issued. Building, electrical, plan reviews are done out of there, mechanical permits, occupancy permits, everything are issued out of that unit, the construction unit. The finance and business and vendor licensing unit is where all the vendor licensing, contractor licensing, if you're an electrician, you go there to update your electrical license. They do all of the intake of financial applications. Anything that comes in essentially with a check attached to it, they process all of that. So any building permit application, any business license, any contractor license. So they're very busy. And as a matter of fact, we just got a new assistant director covering that spot. Her name is Sarah Kinter. She comes to us from the Commission on Human Rights. She's very qualified, great lady. We look forward to working long and well with her. So back to my actual job and what I oversee. So when it comes to property maintenance, to give you a little bit of scope on that, from August of 2016 to August of 2017, we processed 41,000 complaints. So out of that 41,000 complaints, about 90% of them come in via 311. So when you call up 311, the process now goes directly from 311 right to the inspector. They carry surface pros in the field, so when you put in that complaint, it goes right to them. Now, we got 41,000 complaints. We processed probably 30,000 of them. 10,000 of them are referrals to Public Works, the police department, PWSA, you name it. They can go anywhere, or they're unfounded. There could be a duplicate complaint or something to that effect. Of that, about 30,000, about 15 or 20,000 of those go to court. So this is the point where we issue violation notices for garbage and debris, anything where the built world has fallen into a state of discord. Junk vehicles, busted windows, anything you can imagine that could fall under property maintenance. Quite literally, there is no structure in the city or anywhere that we can't cite for something. So we have to be a little diplomatic about that as well. We are kind of universal in how we issue citations. We will issue a citation to anybody that earns it, essentially. Our citation process starts out with an initial notice of violation. You'll get 30 days to abate that violation. If you don't, we'll do a reinspection. Second notice will come, you'll get an additional 30 days to fix it. If you didn't abate, you go to third notice. That third notice, when it comes, you get the notice as well as it splits off to court. The notice goes to court, and then you'll have to go and explain it to the judge why you didn't abate it. One misconception about our department is that we issue fines. That is not correct. We do not issue fines for anything. The judge issues fines. If you go to court and you get a fine, the judge gave it to you, not us. When it comes to fire maintenance inspections, the construction unit of the department issues a permit to build a sprinkler system, build a fire alarm system in a building. After that system is in place and tested and functions for a year, it flips back over to the maintenance side. We'll walk into an operating business, a hotel, a motel, an apartment building, and see if that system is still working. You know, we walked into Market Square, we went around to every single place, every single restaurant in there to see if their fire alarms are working, if their panels are working, and if they're not, they get cited for it. Now, when it comes to fire maintenance inspections, they have a much lesser of a time. If you have a critical fire violation, like your panel's not working or the fire alarm's not working, you got 5 days to resolve it. And if it's a spot where individuals reside or it's a dwelling unit, we'll then refer to the fire department. You have to have a fire watch come in. That means you have to have a firefighter standing there in the building. So the fire maintenance and construction fire side of the department is a very integral and very important part of what goes on. To give you a little bit of reference about how important some of these systems are, I'm sure you're all very aware of what happened in Las Vegas not too long ago. One of the main ways they tracked down that individual is it tripped the alarm in his room because of the smoke from the fire, from the guns. That's how they knew where he was at. So that's how critical some of these systems are. We take it very serious. Individuals comply generally pretty quick when it comes to that. We will never be coming into your house to do fire checks either, by the way. It's strictly a commercial application for that. Occupancy maintenance, that is another thing that we handle. Occupancy maintenance is, this building was issued an occupancy permit to be an office building. We have all of the occupancy permits on file in our office. If we find out that this is no longer an office building and they're selling used vehicles out of the lobby, then they're going to get cited for it. So I come over on the operations side, on the maintenance side, and I then issue, I don't, but the inspectors issue them a violation notice that they're out of what they're allowed to do, what they're permitted to do with that building. For the business licensing and vendor licensing, this is probably what you may know the most. You know, the food trucks, you know, the people selling water at the games, secondhand dealers, mechanical license, you know, everybody likes the gambling machines in the bars and stuff. All of those things require licensing. So we go into every single one of those and we check those. The vendor licensing spans a lot of different things, where we'll have stationary vendors where they're allowed to participate in a lottery, and the city has X amount of spots where these stationary vendors can stand or sit. We have licensing where the vendors have to pick up and move their stuff every 15 minutes because they're not allowed to stay there. They don't have a stationary permit to do it. The Steelers, Pirates, and Penguins will retain our services to go over and look for individuals. Well, actually, I shouldn't have said that. The NFL, NHL, and NBL will retain our services to try to find people selling illegal jerseys, because that's a licensed product by the NFL and those organizations, and they want to know who's selling their stuff. Those people have a lot of money. They pay a lot of money to keep their money. So that's one of the other things. And finally, city-sponsored demolition. This is probably one of the largest areas within the operation unit that I work the closest with. When I say city-funded demolition, that is demolition that the city literally pays for to have a structure raised. I work with a pool of about 1,000 properties in and out that are condemned. Because a building is condemned does not mean it's going to be raised. Raised is the technical term for demolishing a structure. We have, we're on the page right here. So these are some of the reasons why a property will be condemned. I can take a $10 million property If the water service is shut off to that property, it's condemned. You're not allowed to inhabit a dwelling unit if the water service is shut off. The electricity can be shut off, the gas can be shut off, the cable can be shut off, but the water cannot be. When the water is shut off, it creates a sanitary situation. So I don't care where the house is or what the dwelling unit is or how much it's worth. If the water service is severed, you are not allowed to inhabit that structure. But people think because if the water service is inhabited and I go and put a condemned sticker up on there, that the building's going to be taken down the next day, and that's not the case. When a building is condemned, the building can be condemned for 20 or 30 years and can stay on the list if it's structurally sound. If it reaches the point where it's imminently dangerous, and that's imminently dangerous of collapse, then it makes the list where it's going to be raised. So I work through a long list of properties that go through this process. And unsafe structures, unsafe equipment, I can condemn a structure if the gas company comes in and, have you heard red tagging a building? So the gas company has either found a leak somewhere in that property and they'll shut the gas off, or they'll find a leak in the furnace. I can condemn a property for a leaky furnace. And when it's condemned, under any condition, you are not allowed to inhabit the structure. Now this primarily revolves around dwelling units. If Pizza Hut gets their water service turned off, it's really not a concern of mine. It's a concern of the health department. They're going to be very concerned about something like that, but that's not something that I deal with. So with this, I do publish everything that is condemned in the city. So right here, this actually used to be condemned, under contract, and raised. I added this asbestos survey because there's been a new interpretation of the EPA rules about what requires an asbestos survey. An asbestos survey is when an environmental company comes in and they take samples of everything in the building and then test them to see if it has asbestos in it. I used to be under a protocol where I only had to test commercial buildings, and if I was going to raise more than 3 single-family homes on a single block, I had to then have surveys done. Under this new interpretation, I have to have everything surveyed. Outhouse, doghouse, single-family home, it doesn't make any difference. I have to have a survey done on it. So with that said, I started now publishing what's in line to get a survey. Surveys take time. I have to get a contract, I have to put it out to bid. Sure.
Don't mean to interrupt your flow, but you said that there was a change in the interpretation of the law for the EPA, an EPA law. So how does that go about? Like an administration comes in and it's their decision to how that law is interpreted, or did someone challenge it in court and a judge said, we're now going to interpret this law this way?
So all of that.
Okay.
In our case, we worked on, let me back up. The EPA has a set of standards. Allegheny County Health Department enforces those standards, along with a couple different other organizations in there, but I primarily work with the Allegheny County Health Department. So when I had said that we were able to, like I could go onto a block and I could raise a single family home and I didn't have to have the survey done, that has now changed. If I raise one house, it has to have a survey, and the interpretation has changed. So part of the new administration in the health department has taken a much different interpretation of what the EPA has had handed down. There is litigation surrounding all of it. Every other municipality in Allegheny County, this has impacted. It does impact us greatly as well. At one point, I was raising anywhere between 20 and 25 structures every 2 weeks. Since this interpretation and our redesign of all of our contracts, I've gotten about 50 done in a year. So we're just starting to kind of come back into it because of this new interpretation. It actually did sideline things for months. We now have another kind of thing we're trying to work through. There's been another change with federal money, CDBG money, where you can no longer earmark something, say, I'm going to put this $100,000 towards this building and demolish the building when I can get to it. Now, if I put $100,000 to that, I have to have that money spent in the project done There's no longer the earmarking. I have to have it done now before like January 1st. So that interpretation just happened in July, that changed. So they kind of changed the goalpost for me when it comes to using CD money. So I don't have a ton of CD money to use. I usually use it all up first, but there's other departments in the city that did not use their money. So we're going to use some of that money to raise some derelict commercial structures around the city. But nonetheless, I have to have all of that done now before January 1st, and I'm running out of time. When we condemn a property, there's a bunch of things that do happen, and I don't want to spend too much on what I actually do. There's a lot of stuff to cover with the department. This list right here, Molly, could you open that for one quick second? So when you look at this, it gives you all the critical information about this piece of property that you would need to know about essentially when it happened. I don't give much information on here why it was condemned unless you see on there that there was a fire. If there is a catastrophic fire, a structure will be condemned almost immediately. We just had one, I think, right, correct. So that home 306 Rochelle is a total loss. So the first thing that happens is it's condemned. So this kind of gives you the address, where it's at, what it is, and what the condemnation date is. Like for instance, this right here, 5278 was condemned back in 2009. So they can sit on here for a long time. 2001, when I first got here, there was one that was condemned in like 1976. And when it's condemned, but if it stands, we'd like to see it fixed. Our job is not to go out and eliminate structures by any means. We would like to see these homes fixed. But to give you a little bit of context, back in the day, Pittsburgh proper had about 1 million people living in it, okay? There's less than 300,000 now. 700,000 people did not take their houses with them. So that leaves us a large inventory to manage. Of course, I'm using round numbers. But when these places fall into situations where nobody's taking care of them and they become dangerous, we have no other option. We generally, well, I shouldn't say that generally. In every case, we go after the owner first. If there's an owner and we can go after them, we're going after them. That's what our first course of action is. The last course of action is to spend tax money to raise a structure. With the new interpretation of the asbestos rules and regulations, I could raise a single-family home asbestos-free for about $7,000 last year. If I raise it now and I don't do the asbestos, it's $50,000. So there's a considerable difference and a huge impact to my budget and what I can remediate. For instance, some of the commercial structures I wanted to...
If you haven't tested for asbestos, you have to assume it's asbestos, it contains asbestos, and you spend the $50K.
Well, yes and no. Every single structure gets put out to public bid. We have a pre-qualified contract where contractors are all qualified. They have to go through a vetting process and they end up on this list. And they all have an opportunity to bid on it. So if they're going to take down a structure and it's hot, that means that we're deeming it hot. That means it may or may not have asbestos, but we never did the survey. It has to be assumed that there is asbestos in it. So yes, it could go a single-family home, depending on topography, location, access. It could go as much as $60,000 for a house.
How much does the inspection cost for asbestos?
Oh, to do the survey? About $400.
So why doesn't the city do the survey first?
Like, for instance, this catastrophic fire that just happened, we don't have a chance to do it, so everything in there has to be assumed to be asbestos laden. And where it comes into is the process that the contractor has to go through to remove that structure. If it's asbestos, it has to be put into line dumpsters. They have to be soaking it with water so all the fibers are held down. They have to have an individual from an environmental company standing there the entire time. So asbestos is very serious. You know, when you hear mesothelioma, that's what they're talking about. Pittsburgh has an abnormally high rate of this. Generally, asbestos, I don't want to get too far into this, but asbestos is a product that does not burn. So it was used in high heat applications. Boilers, they put pipe insulation around them. Floor tile was made out of asbestos. Siding on homes were made out of asbestos. It's kind of an indestructible product. That's why it was used. But it does cause terrible side effects. And the dumping fees go up dramatically.
Sorry. Roy Blankenship of Knoxville. I work for Hilltop Alliance, which has a property stabilization program. I don't know if you've heard of it. We
Yes.
work closely with PLI. I've abated a lot of situations where homeowners had that problem of, say, the asbestos or the house deteriorating and facing fines. My question to you, me being a Boilermaker for 17 years, I was trained in removing it. Now, going out and seeing these houses, like, how much would it cost the city just like in general yearly, like for the inspectors? Do the inspectors like just say, hey, this house needs to be demolished? And then, I mean, you're saying that there's only a certain amount that get done a year, but are there a lot of reports pulled in on houses that need to be demolished?
So, yeah, this list right here has 1,000 structures on it right now. So this changes every single day. I take stuff off of it, I add stuff to it. I get a lot of building permits that are returned to me where somebody bought a derelict home, rehabilitated it, abated the condemnation, and it gets taken off of this list. Today I had 4 properties go on it. Yesterday I had 12 go on it. The day before that I had 10 come off of it. So this list is active all the time. It gets updated on this site every Friday. But I'm on it every single day doing maintenance on it. When I first received this list 3 years ago, it had 1,500 to 1,600 structures on it. After I scrubbed it for 18 months, we got it down below 1,000. This is one of the most critical aspects of management, is knowing what the inventory is. I had to do an emergency demolition not too long ago. The property wasn't on here and we didn't even know it had collapsed. So we have a lot of people in the field, but your input and your letting me know is a huge part of that. We're trying to move a little bit away from an organization that bludgeons individuals with code into compliance to more of a partnership. So
they've been working with me. I'd like to say that the city has guys. They willing to, if you catch an inspector or you have someone that tells you about that, it's easier for the homeowner to try to reach out to that inspector and ask for time, or say that they need help trying to find a contractor. I do know your policy has been, from the inspectors that I have in my area, we talk closely, that they are given the leeway to try to work with these homeowners, as rather to put our seniors and a lot of our people into courts. So that's very good.
yeah, sure. So I don't live in all your neighborhoods. So what happens in your neighborhood is really your business. But if you don't tell me about it, or you don't come to me about it, I have to find out on my own. I work with about 15 to 17 inspectors, and we oversee the entire city. And to give you a little bit of scope, Cincinnati has 70 inspectors. So we handle a lot of complaints, we handle a huge volume, and what we're doing, like on the last package of structures I put out to be raised, the majority of those were from CDCs. Homes that the community development groups saw as ones that they wanted to advance their neighborhoods and get rid of them. And I personally don't care. Unless it falls under being imminently dangerous, it's really up to you. If it's imminently dangerous, it's collapsing, I'll step in and you will have little to no say in it. But stuff that you can have go, that's where I want the participation. And it worked out very well. I had the balance of our CD money. I separated into $18,000 units, and the community development groups picked the 8 homes that went onto that list. They were derelict properties, but they were sound enough that they weren't imminently dangerous. But it was a boon to that neighborhood to get rid of it.
Quick question. Do they have like a housing bank? I know Detroit has a housing bank of condemned properties that now belong to the city. Does the city own these condemned properties?
We do not. So 95% of these are privately owned properties. We do not take possession of them either. After I go in and I raise a structure, I issue a lien letter. If it was $25,000 to take that structure down, that property is now liened with $25,000.
Have you identified all the owners?
I go by this county website, whoever's on there. That's our legal obligation. So if there's more owners that I don't know about, then it's actually the homeowner's responsibility to make sure that the county records reflect what they want it to reflect. We are making leaps and bounds with the county records. One of the kind of crux in the whole thing is we will cite somebody based on the county record, and we get all the way to court, and the service is bad. They didn't get service. Our legal obligation is to make sure that property owner got service. That means that they got the papers, they got the notices. Well, judge has to, when they get our criminal complaint, the judge in the court sends a letter to that property owner on the address that we gave them. If their stuff comes back with no service, we can't go to, they'll throw it out. It gets dismissed based on no service.
And what I've noticed, to give credit to the city, is that through my job, there's a lot of properties in the city of Pittsburgh that are owned by outside sources, and a lot of these organizations or people, they do not have addresses that are actually valid on the county website. From what I was last told, and it wasn't too long ago, the city's trying to find a way to get these people and hold them accountable. But just in my daily basis of my job during time, I could spend almost 2 to 3 weeks just trying to track down one person from an address. So it is hard.
It is, and the volume that we're doing is, it makes a huge impact. If I'm writing 30,000 violation notices, I need to make sure that I'm getting the right service, because it's got to go out regular mail and it's got to go out certified mail. You know how much it costs to send a certified letter? If you do that 40,000 times, how much it costs? And then to not get service based on that.
While we're still on violations, what happens, in my experience, I've been familiar with a property that got sent all the way to housing court, but the judge granted a continuance. And then and I found that out, and so the next time I looked on the system that shows the database of all the property violations, the property was no longer on there. So is it the case that if something gets, dismissed in housing court, the person says, oh, I'm going to fix it, the judge believes them and lets them go, and does the process start from scratch again, from someone having to call 311 to get it back on your database?
It can. So you're talking about when a judge hands down a ruling. I don't know what the exact number is, but district justices hand out continuances on 40% of our cases. They'll say, person comes in, say, I was sick, I was out of town, any number of reasons that a judge can be sympathetic to that. Now, I can't speak about what a judge says, what they do. It's their courtroom, it's their call. But it's very frustrating for one of my inspectors to spend half a year getting to court to have the judge say, oh, here's a 180-day continuance, please get it done. Because essentially what that did was gave them 6 months. They have 6 full months before we can recite them again if they don't do it. It doesn't make the violations go away on a continuance. Even being dismissed doesn't. They dismiss cases based on service. They'll dismiss a case based on not understanding what we cited them for. Dismissals do not abate anything. It can be a little disheartening. It can take the wind out of the sails of an inspector that's dealing with thousands and thousands of cases and sitting in court for an entire day, hearing 30 or 40 cases and coming out of there, and 25 of them got continuances. You've heard of being guilty in absentia. We show up for court, the defendant doesn't show up, and the judge continues it. Well, that shouldn't be the case. They should be found guilty because they didn't show up, but they get a continuance anyway. So, like I said, and all the district justices are different, and somebody can be found guilty. They can get a $10,000 fine, and they can go right to appeals court. They have 30 days to appeal it, and then our inspectors go to appeals court. And that $10,000 fine can be reduced down to $50, and then they have another 30 days to fix it. So there's a lot of frustration with the actual legal system, and that we file criminal complaints. It's kind of like we're criminalizing some individual that doesn't have the means to fix a property, or have fallen on hard times, or it's a divorce situation and the guy can't afford to fix the house anymore, or the wife can't fix it anymore. So there's been a lot of talk. I was in Memphis earlier this year at the University of Memphis Law School, and we had a 3-day symposium on how to participate more with the property owners. And this is where I get back to me coming in, giving you a criminal violation and taking you to court to fix it. Well, is there a way for us to participate with you to make you better understand what has to happen? Home Depot will pay for the materials if we could have one of the CDCs come over and paint your fence instead of me citing you for it. So we're trying to make it'd be a fundamental change in what we do, but it's also a huge lift. It's a huge undertaking. I want to do it because it's kind of under the umbrella that we're going to get more bees with honey than we are with vinegar. Director Kennedy and myself and a couple other individuals in the department have been talking a lot about how can we change the processes to participate more with the citizens. My tenure was, here's the code book, do it or else. I've been in this industry about 20 years. I moved to Pittsburgh about 5 years ago from Erie, Pennsylvania, and that's what we did there. And I heard from people all around the country at this symposium, and that's what they do. Just little tiny things too that would help and help individuals, or help us be better partners with property owners and business owners alike. Everybody has their house, everybody has to live there. We're not out to get anybody. We're not playing gotcha or any of those type of games. We're not out demolishing property so the city can steal the land. We're not doing any of that type of stuff, and I get constantly accused of that. It may be funny, but I was just up on Perrysville Avenue a couple of weeks ago, and we took down a terrible derelict structure up there. And I probably had 10 people call me every name in the book thinking that I demolished the property because I wanted to take the property. And that couldn't have been further from the truth. I have nothing to do with that. I myself, when I came here, I bought a derelict house for $1, and I'm rehabbing it myself. So there's a lot of misinterpretation about what happens with our department. But the website is your best resource for this. If you could go to, real quick, like the asbestos surveys.
Excuse me, before you move on, April, a lot of those, and what you were saying about the 40%, a lot of the houses also, I don't know if you guys might not know, but there's what's called a tangled title, and that's where someone had owned a property and they may have passed away, and even though they might have heirs or kids that can come and take that property, it can't be transferred into their name. So that leaves a big problem for the city, and it leaves a problem for basically the magistrate or whoever. I mean, how can you actually deal with that property if the homeowner's dead and gone, and their kid might come to court, but it's not in their name. So you can't find the family member, and then you can't. So there's quite a few properties sitting in the city right now that are in that status. So.
I hope this doesn't sound like it's from left field, but I've attended a few land bank meetings, the land bank that the city's trying to get started. So is that going to be, could that be a remedy to some of these condemned properties?
Sure.
Because the land bank would then transfer the ownership to the city after due process and all that kind of stuff.
Sure.
Right?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. That is one of the solutions. There's a couple different sides to that story. There are advocates that believe that the municipality should never own property, never take them into, or take responsibility for them, because once they do, they're on the hook for them. And then there are, the school of thought that let's get somebody in this house, let's get it rehabilitated, let's get it back on the market, let's get it back on the tax rolls. So speaking to what this gentleman just said, there's one derelict property that I'm working with right now that is just falling down. The CDC has a buyer for it, but the title is so messed up that they can't get it to transfer. This buyer's never going to do anything with that property until they have title with it, rightfully so. You never do something to a property that you don't own. But the property's collapsing. So that's another thing. I'm babysitting this property while it's falling apart, but the title and transfers of these titles do come into play. But the land bank is one of the options, and it's a part in an aggregate of different things that would happen. You know, we change our fundamental way we deal with it. We work with the land banks, and we work with as many people as we possibly can to make it more of a communal effort to bring these properties out of the condemnation.
Can't you use adverse possession, publish occupation by the city, and then after whatever number of years it is, the city owns that property?
So that sounds like a giant legal question. I'm not a lawyer. I can't answer that. I don't play one on TV. Some people accuse me of looking like one. I am not. That sharp, useless look. I'm sorry if there's any attorneys in here. I did not mean that. So yes, the taking possession of the structures or the property is part of the land banking, and once the land bank has it, the transfer to the new individual or organization is made simple. So yes, the title, everything he said about title issues is true.
I just got a simple one. Is there more information based on like the nature of why the property was condemned on the website? Or anything, or do you have to do more of a legwork?
So when it gets to condemnation, we do keep a file on every property. I don't list on the condemnation why it's been condemned. Like I said, there could be any number of reasons, just the water being shut off. You could come to the office and get a copy of the file on it, and it could list everything that's in there. If you buy a property that is condemned, you have to file a building permit to abate condemnation, and we'll put on there what you have to do to pull it out of condemnation. Like I said, it could be condemned for the smallest reason. My house that I purchased for $1 was condemned by the county. It was not condemned by the city, which doesn't count. Any property that is boarded up in the city, the county assumes is condemned. So when I filed a building permit with mine, it wasn't condemned with the city, but I filed a building permit for interior and exterior renovations. But the list of stuff that had to be done was too long to write down. You know, it had been abandoned for 5 or 6 years. There was a hole in the roof the size of this table. It rained inside the building for 5 years. So if you're asking me from like a flipping a house standpoint,
More like a CDC thing.
sure. If you're thinking about that, or any participant in the community groups, and you're thinking about somehow acquiring a property or something like that, your first stop should be our office, and finding what violations, what's tagged on that house, where it's at in the system. If it's okay. So could you go real quick to the back to
Cascade, so we're tied in
under contract?
26 properties.
What was that?
It's Cascade, and we're already tied in like 26 properties now.
Yeah. So.
I'm not sure what the status is on each one.
So this is kind of playing to what he's talking about right now, what the condition of the property is. This right here, this list is what's under contract right now to be raised. 2009, D-Rod, 13, 15, 1015 Homewood, Monticello, and this 518 Brushton are all raised. They're gone. Those structures are gone. This remains on the list on here because the job isn't complete until I receive the invoice from the contractor. Monday, these will all be taken off of here. They'll be flipped over and they'll be onto the page that says raised. But when a property reaches this point where I've not put it out to bid and it's under contract, the only way to stop that demolition is to get an injunction from court. So this happens all the time. We cite somebody, we put it under contract, the machine shows up to start tearing the building down, then they come out and cry foul. So if they want skin in the game, they've got to hire an attorney, go down to court, get a judge to say, yes, we're putting an injunction to stop this demolition. But once it gets to this point, that's the only way to stop it. And the change from the past is we allowed you to file a building permit. If you filed the building permit, we would stay the demolition, but we were finding out people would file a building permit and 5 years later hadn't done anything. So when it gets to this point, you have to file an injunction to stop it. And it is relatively common. We do go through that. We had a situation where we were going to take down a building and there was a squatter in it. So a squatter has rights. They do not have rights to file the injunction because they don't own the property. But the property was condemned, they weren't allowed to be in the first place, but the owner showed up and filed the injunction. So that took and stretched that demolition out about 8 months that we spent in court. There's going to be, coming up here shortly, at any given time, probably 25 or 30 structures that will be under contract at any given time. They come off of the condemned list and they go on to here. Unless, like the fire we were just talking about, there was a catastrophic fire, it skipped the list and it's going to be under contract. Fortunately, that house had insurance on it.
Yeah, he's happy.
Well, he's kind of happy because when a house burns or a house has a catastrophic failure and there's insurance on it, the insurance company is obligated to send a check to the finance department to remediate that. So for that house, I think we got like an $18,000 check from the insurance company. If that property owner doesn't make a move to abate that condition, I can go in, raise the structure, and keep the $18,000 from the insurance company. We just had a property that somebody bought a building, I want to say it was in Shadyside, rehabilitated this entire apartment building from a fire, and we were holding on to $250,000. Well, they didn't get that money back until the condition was abated. All the permits were done, the occupancies were reissued, and the insurance holder, the policy holder, was issued that money back then. It's kind of our way to prompt you to do what you're supposed to do. That house that you're talking about, the one that just burned, we have $18,000, but to rebuild that home would be $250,000. So the person's probably going to take the money, raise the home, keep the rest of the money, and not rebuild.
Yeah.
So it does happen. So that was a lot about demolition. And to kind of reinforce that, I don't handle anything but city-sponsored demolition. The private demolitions that go on are all handled by the construction inspectors because they're under permits and they're parts of other construction projects or private property owners raising structures. And it could be a single-family home or a demolition permit associated with some sort of commercial development where they're raising 20 houses to put in new condos or whatever the case may be. But that does not go through me. But I do get a lot of questions about demolitions. So, does anybody have any additional questions about demo, or do we want to move on?
I happen to notice, I think with my poor eyesight here, that that one of the houses on my street is condemned.
Okay.
Does that mean that somebody could buy that house, or not necessarily?
So, with most of the properties I deal with that I'm going to demolish, we don't own, and we never take ownership of them.
Right,
So if an
okay.
individual wanted to buy that property, they would have to
Find
track
the
down the owner,
Okay.
track down the title, and find out who they'd have to go to do that. There are condemned properties on this list that the city does own. So yes, you are eligible, and the city is very anxious to put people in those. And it's as easy as going to the, if you're looking down the list and you say, oh, I'd like to see if I can flip that house, pick up the address, go to the city county website, see who owns it. Because they're going to give the owner and the alleged address of that owner. This building that we're in is the address for the city if they own the property. But you can go through real estate, the finance department, and they're constantly right now, they're actually trying to, with that list, trying to get a better list of properties to advance to somebody else right now.
Yeah, that's
Right.
the one that Chuck talked about at the finance presentation.
Yeah, so it's, like I said, we don't want to demolish houses. We don't want to spend money that way. So it would behoove us to rehabilitate them.
I'm sorry. I don't like to be redundant and talk about the same thing over and over again. But you brought up the discussion of liens during your discussion, okay? Now, this is a subject that I'm always interested in. How does the city or your department utilize a lien to keep like the properties that you don't own from being sold out from under you without the lien being paid? Like, how do you do it? You put a lien on it, and then someone comes around and wants to buy the property that's been raised, and how does that happen?
So a lien is a legal action. When I lien a property, I send a lien letter to wherever the property address is. Here's one thing I don't do with a lien. If the only address that I have is a structure that I just raised, I don't send them a letter, okay? So you'll see sometimes on there, it'll say lien letter, it'll say unknown. I don't send those out because that gets back to service then. If that individual that owns that property doesn't get service and they don't get notice, it doesn't count. So when we raise a structure, put a lien against a property, it becomes a legal action, and that is legally then registered with the county. That property then, when it's sold, the liens have to be satisfied according to how they're, essentially how they are, who gets first priority. So the municipality generally gets first priority. So go the municipality, like PWSA, and then the bank. So if there's a mortgage against it, generally bank doesn't get anything. But liening a property, if I go into a neighborhood that is depressed in any way or is struggling in any way, I raise a house and I lien that property for $40,000, and the property's only, the vacant lot's only worth $5,000 to start with, who's going to pay the $45,000 for that piece of land to come in and build a house there? So it's kind of a double-edged sword. Yes, we're putting the liens on there. Yes, we're trying to do the right thing. And yes, I think it has a profound effect on whether they're going to redevelop that. Getting liens lifted would be something an individual would petition the city for. CDCs do it all the time. There's a large lot up on Mount Washington where there's a catastrophic fire on Boggs Avenue. I took down 4 buildings at one time, and we're going to lien the property, but the CDC wants to put a bunch of housing in there. So the CDC would petition the city to get relief from the lien. All I do is file it. I have no authority whatsoever to lift a lien.
Did you know who the owner was for those properties?
Yes.
It was mysterious
how it burnt.
It's always
Actually, it wasn't mysterious because the owner had no insurance. So they're making no money on this deal. In fact, they're losing everything.
mysterious to the neighbors. It's like 4 houses, 4 doors down from them.
You know what I'm talking about? Yeah, so the CDC has, what is that, 4 acres up there or something? So, you know.
Yeah, because there's an huge empty lot right next to it.
Right, yeah, so that participates with that. And, you know, if that CDC wants to go to the city and petition them to somehow get relief from that lien, that's something they can do. I don't get involved in that. I do present the information that I retain if they need it for a legal issue.
So just for clarity, a lien is a permanent thing. That's like after a certain amount of time, the city won't just be like, oh, all right, whatever. Like it's permanent, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Liens can be paid though. When I send out a lien letter, you have the opportunity to go to finance and set up a payment plan with them. And people actually do it. I'm shocked when it happens, but people do it. We have one lady, I think she lives in California or something, pays the finance department $50 a month, you know, on an $8,000 lien for a demolition. So they're quite literally going to pay that for quite a few years. We're not the only department that liens. Public Works puts liens on it. We work with Public Works in that I'll go to a property, we'll cite them for garbage, debris, weeds up to your neck. We send out notices, get no action from the property owners, and then we'll issue what's called a clean and lien. Public Works then will send a crew over, clean the entire property, cut everything down, and then they'll put a lien against the property. We had a situation not too long ago, an individual out of town owned a vacant lot. The city kept going over and cleaning it, cutting the grass, cleaning up the garbage, and liening it every single time. He had a buyer for that lot for $10,000 and found out there were $13,000 in liens. So that is one of the problems with liening it. So he had a ready, willing, and able buyer. He's got to essentially say, if you want this property, you got to buy it back off the city for 13 grand worth of liens. And he's going to get nothing. But he claimed that he didn't get service. So he's got to be able to be informed. You have to be informed to get service, but it's also the property owner's responsibility that the records with Allegheny County are correct. You can't put a P.O. box in there for Miami, Florida, when you're living in California to somehow
So you're still at fault.
divert the responsibility, correct. If you own the property, you're responsible for it. We can't cite anybody but the property owners. So, with that said, is there anything anybody wants me to touch on?
The different types of PLI inspectors you have?
Different types of inspectors, okay. So under operations, I have essentially 3 different inspectors, 3 different types of inspectors. I have an operations inspector that enforce the property maintenance code. They enforce the property maintenance code. We also enforce all of the zoning regulations. Zoning is a separate department, but we do their enforcement in the field. So when it says you got to be your pool's got to be 5 feet off the line, that's what zoning's telling you. We go out and we check it. We have fire maintenance inspectors. They're the ones that go in. They'd come into this to make sure the alarms are working, the strobes are working, the sprinkler systems are working. Bless you. And then I have code inspectors that are individuals that are in the office that don't hold a licensing but do very specific things. They only cite for garbage and debris, busted sidewalks, junk vehicles, indoor furniture that is now outdoor furniture, the sofa on the couch or the sofa on the porch thing. That is a rule that is in the city code. It was before my time, but somebody tells me it goes back to Pitt students dragging couches out off their couches and setting them on fire. So indoor furniture outside is a big deal. And having those 3 individuals that are just citing those things gives the operations inspector some relief. So they're citing specifically for weeds and debris, but only on vacant lots. But there's thousands and thousands and thousands of vacant lots.
Isn't there a combined one also?
So the term combined operations inspector means that they're doing business licensing, they're doing property maintenance, they're doing zoning, and they're doing occupancy inspections. So we moved from our department having individuals segregated and doing specific things to certifying and licensing individuals on the construction side. The construction inspector is licensed to do building, mechanical, brand new fire installations, energy, and mechanical. So they're licensed to do those 5 things, and they're a combination inspector. So that's what that plays to, that they have quite a few disciplines
I know
that they
they're
act
fairly
on.
new. That's why I said that title, the combined.
Yeah, it's about 2 years old, 2.5 years old. So that was part of the renovation of our department. Our department has changed dramatically in the past 4 years. It's not even recognizable from when I started. When I started, they handed me a pad of paper and a box of pencils. I hadn't seen a pencil in a decade, so I was a little concerned. So we've moved the department ahead leaps and bounds. We've digitized everything. We have cell phones in the hands of every inspector. We have Surface laptops in the hands of every inspector. We've cross-trained everybody. Because this department is, let me back up. Our department, one of the key things of our department is information dissemination. We have to get the information out. There's a very good chance if you take care of your property, your structure, you may never interact with us, ever. You could own your house for 25 years, and then you want to put a deck on it, and then you've got to go through the process. So what we've done in the past 3 years is made it very intuitive. Nobody wants to sit down and read code books. I don't want to do that. They're hard to read, they're difficult to interpret. So we tried to make everything as intuitive as possible by doing this type of thing. You know, about PLI, residential building permits, what do you need? What do you need for commercial permits? And with this, we also tied it to Building Eye. That's what I told you in the very beginning, that this site is updated almost in real time via this site. So when one of my inspectors gets something in their queue to go out and check for garbage and debris, they're sitting at that property and they punch in there, yes, violations found. And they hit the button and it gets sent back in, and then that Building Eye pulls right from that system and posts it on here.
When you have an opportunity, and if you've spoken enough about inspectors, could you talk a little bit about variance permits and like what sort of criteria and where you how you evaluate whether or not you're going to allow people to alter maybe the usage of their building space?
So there was a lot in that question. Most of it we don't handle.
Okay.
Variances and everything go through zoning.
And you will meet with zoning with the Department of City Planning. That's who houses the zoning office. So
Yeah.
stay tuned.
So in the simplest terms, zoning is,
Even though they require a permit to do that, like, you don't make the decision on it. Is that right or not right?
let me back up.
Sorry.
All permits start in zoning. If you want a deck in your backyard, you've got to go to zoning first. That's where the application starts. You'll go in there, they'll tell you whether you can have the deck. Do you have enough space for that deck? Where's the deck allowed to be? Once that's established and they issue that, you'll need an occupancy permit for that as well. Then it comes over to our department and we'll issue the building permit associated with that deck. So land usage is zoning. They regulate all the land. You've got X amount of land on your lot. You can only use so much of it. You can only put things so close to the lot lines. That's what zoning does, but we enforce that in the field. But variances are strictly the zoning department. So if you want a variance, you got to have a hearing. If you want a variance, you want to build your deck and you want to infiltrate the setback, the 5 foot over there, you got to go have a zoning hearing. Your neighbor's got to say, yeah, it's okay that they build into that area. So zoning regulates land use.
Do they have their own inspectors in the zoning office?
They don't. That's what makes Pittsburgh different.
Okay.
So where I came from, the zoning department has their own inspectors. They'll go out and see, you applied for this, you want your pool, your deck right here, we'll send somebody out to check it. But here, enforcement of their rules lands in our office. We work obviously very closely with zoning, but their determinations about what happens is exclusively them.
So you go out to the field to gather evidence, like basically, I mean, you're just gathering evidence and then you're just bringing it back to them and they're making a decision. And like based on what your inspectors bring back or?
No.
Oh.
I think any sort of, like if you're applying for a zoning variance, the burden of proof is on you.
Okay.
Correct, and we have nothing to do with that.
Yeah, so like if you're applying for it, then you have to bring all the schematics and mapping and everything to that zoning hearing.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
Just trying to understand the structure here.
Just like an example, like one of the house I kind of rehab on Garfield. What I did is I want to put a condenser for AC outside, and they tell me have to be, I don't know, I think it's like 8 foot off the house. So then I have to draw on a paper like where it needs to be, how far from the house, what corner from east, what different direction, east to west. And then I have to make sure when I have a HVAC technician to tell them where exactly this needs to sit. So
and that speaks to land
and then
usage.
when the inspector comes back from this, what they call his building, they come and look at it, just make sure. Pretty much, I don't think your office don't do electrical and then what they call HVAC. The third-party contractor, right? They only do building inspection, what they call it, a fire and sprinkler.
We do electrical. We just got a couple new electrical inspectors, so we're doing residential electrical inspections, but commercial has been third party because we got reduced down to only having one electrical inspector, and there's a lot of electrical work going on, so there's no way that he could have supported that workload. So we did just get 2 new guys in. They're going through the training process and the testing and licensing right now. But yeah, some of the other stuff we do third party stuff out that we do, that the volume has now increased because of how we've made everything more efficient, more customer service oriented. A lot more people are participating, and Pittsburgh is really booming right now with building. There's a lot of building going on right now. So yes, our inspectors do get spread a little bit thin, but we did ask for more coming up this year. So this is the actual map. So when an individual and one of my inspectors are in the field, they see the violation notice, they put it in the software, they click it, goes in, yes it exists. Not within 10 minutes, but it will show up here shortly thereafter. And you'll get these pings on this map showing what's what. And if you use the other side over there, there's enforcement, licensing, and planning. This also draws right from Excella. Excella is the software package that we use to issue all of our permits out of. Somebody comes in, files a building permit, this software goes into Excella, pulls it out, and says, well, there's a building permit right here for an addition on this house. So we're trying to make it so if your neighbor's building something, you can go log on at your house, see if they have a building permit. You don't have to call us. So, yeah. So,
I think there's a
So if
question.
they don't have a building permit, and I basically, like, say somebody has so my grandma has well, my grandma's 92, and she just don't have the trees sway a different way, or she's gonna have a problem. So somebody next door, they built like this. It looks like this just brick structure. There's no building permit. Like, they found out that they didn't have a building permit. It was like some doctor came in and just started building stuff, and he didn't have a permit. So the structure's just up there. Will you all make him take it down if he doesn't have a permit, or like if he just wants to go and get a permit for it now, or like what happens? Like, because it's just, everything is just seats. Like, even the bags are like.
so it very well could be in the depths of litigation right now. So I don't know what he built. I don't know the case, but if somebody went in there and started building a garage that they had no permits, no zoning authorization, or anything to that effect, it would be considered an unlawful structure, and we'll stick a condemned sticker on it. If I have one piece of advice, it is much better to take your shots at filing a permit and getting denied than it is doing something and getting caught. There are very few things that you can do in the built world that don't require a permit.
Can you tell a high-level overview? So, for example, if I have an empty lot in the city of Pittsburgh and I want to build a house on it, you said first I have to go to zoning, get my zoning permit, then I come to you.
Well, all building permits, the application process starts in zoning.
Right. Okay. So give me a high-level overview. I go to zoning, then I go where? Come to PLI?
Correct.
Okay. And then I build it, and the inspectors come out and.
Okay, so you have a vacant lot. You want to build a single-family home on that lot. First of all, when you go into zoning, did they allow you to build a house there? Is it zoned for a single-family home?
Yeah.
Okay, so you're allowed to build it there. So they're going to give you the authorization, say, yes, you're allowed to build this house that you're claiming you're going to build. It meets all the criteria. It gets whisked over to our office. You'll file the residential building permit, and then you'd submit a set of plans. The plans have to go through plan review. The permit is not going to be issued, it's going to be in the status of applied for. Once the plan review is done, the plan reviewers and engineers are going to look at it and say, yes, all these plans meet code, we're going to stamp them as reviewed, we'll issue the building permit. Along with that, there's going to be an electrical permit, a mechanical permit, a plumbing permit. We do not handle plumbing, by the way. Allegheny County handles all the plumbing. All plumbing permits come from them, all their inspections come through them. That's another kind of anomaly in Pittsburgh. And then yes, every aspect of that construction will then be inspected through our department with the exception of plumbing.
Okay. And generally, if everybody has all their paperwork, then besides building the house, how long is that process?
To build the house or to get through our department?
The permit. So I go get the permit and you got to go through review. Is that a month? Is that 2 months?
So that has
Assuming
been
everybody
that's been one of the biggest advances in our department right now. So they could do a residential review in 7 days.
Oh, wow.
And they try to do that because we try to be very accommodating to Joe homeowner. So if you're building a $10 million house, your building permit's $43. If you're building a $5,000 house, your permit's $43. So that never changes. When it comes to commercial permits, it's a formula. It's based on how much they're spending. Heinz Field, the permits were $1.5 million because it's based on the cost of construction. The new PNC tower downtown, the permits were $500,000. But a $500,000 home or a $150 million home would be a $43 permit. So we don't want to damage anybody. Most homeowners do their own work.
So it's safe to say that commercial properties are based on a percentage of the construction?
Cost. Correct. So they have a formula that they work through based on all parts of that. Okay. We have 5 minutes.
But just to Mark's point, so Michele, the question you asked is all that information is right here on the website too, that it can walk you through like how to go through the building permit. So maybe quick, we can go through Building Eye.
Sure.
Or whatever you had planned. I just wanted to make sure we covered that.
Yeah, so this is the construction side of the department. This is the side of the department I do not participate in. Residential permits, building permits, deck info. So we broke this all down to try to be as intuitive as possible for Joe homeowner to get through this process. Like I said, nobody in here wants to read code books. I'm one of them. Nobody wants extensive, long applications that you can't understand and you don't know what we're asking for. So this gives you a literal rundown of everything that you need in terms that everybody can understand. There's some contracting language that even to this day I can see it. Up in Erie we called things one thing, down here you call them something else. So we tried to make this intuitive as possible. Going through the zoning review, how to obtain residential building permits, and our review. So this is what I talked about the review process. This residential building review, we're trying to cut it down as short as possible, and we also publish now what position your review is in. Because all the reviews that come into the office, it's first come, first serve, and they're taken in that order. You can't buy your way to the front of the line. We were thinking about that. If you want to move your way to the front of the line, I wouldn't smile because it's going to be really expensive. But it is plausible. Like PNC Tower downtown didn't get any more preference than Joe Homer is getting. Joe Homer got here, wants to build their house, PNC Tower came in behind because that's when the stuff arrived. But plans are very, very important if you're going to build something. In zoning, they want you to put it down on a piece of paper so you can show them where it's at. It's a 1:16 ratio. 1 inch on the paper shows 16 feet. And they did that based on 1 inch being 16 inches and being the universal standard for measurement. So in construction, you do everything, 16 inches on center. So kind of keeping with that, planning, going through, I don't want to talk too much about planning, but having everything down on paper when you walk in there is very important, and understanding how to do it. You have to draw things in pencil or pen, and they do check them with a scale because a ruler delineates X amount of feet, and that's how you can take the 1 inch. An inch is broken down on most rulers into 16 increments. That's how you come up with the feet. That's how they use that. And you have to do it for your deck. And you have to do it for your pool, and you have to show all this stuff on a piece of paper, and then that piece of paper gets a copy, gets attached to the residential building permit. That residential building permit goes to the construction inspector. They say, Joe homeowner's building a deck. He flips it over, he looks at the page. It's got to be in the northeast corner of that property. And he goes back there, yep, there's the deck. If it's not so far off the ground, he doesn't need a building permit. If it doesn't break the 30-inch mark, he doesn't need a building permit. We're just then going out, the construction inspector's just going out there to check the occupancy permit. He's getting an occupancy permit for that deck. Occupancy permits are very important. Any space that's occupied on your property requires an occupancy permit. You're talking about your air conditioning condenser. His condenser now has an occupancy permit in our office. And it's got to match where he said it was supposed to go, and we checked it, and it is where it's supposed to go. If he said it's supposed to be on the south side of the house, and we go there and it's on the north side of the house, it's going to fail the inspection. He's not getting the OC for it, and the condenser's going to have to be moved because zoning only approved it to be on the north side, only approved it on the south side, not on the north side. I feel like I'm rambling. Anything else?
No survey required?
I can't say that zoning and planning don't require surveys. Let me say, our department does not enforce lot lines. If you're having a fight with your neighbor over lot lines, don't call us. Call an attorney. Because we do not enforce lot line disputes. If one of my inspectors show up at your house and you say, well, they're doing this on my lot line, we say, go get a survey, hire an attorney, take that survey, go to court. If you got an occupancy permit to build a fence, fences make great neighbors, well, we get 50 phone calls about fence problems every week. It's too close to my yard, they built it to this, that, the other thing, or they built it over the property line. If somebody builds a fence over your property line, they got to move the fence. But you should have a survey. It's a document that you should have. It's a very good document that you should have. But we don't enforce lot lines. You're not going to see our people out measuring anything. If you say it's on the other side, or your survey says it on the other side, tell it to your attorney. The attorney can explain it to the judge, and you can get the fence moved. And that goes with anything when it comes to lot lines, any side, anywhere. Anything else? You're all stunned by that.
No, not the fence.
Yeah. Yes.
You've said judge a couple of times. Are you specifically referring to the district judges?
So we do use all of them, yes. We use all of them all around the city. Our work assignments are broken down by wards. So I'll have somebody in wards 3, 4, and 5 because 3, 4, and 5 is represented by Judge A. I can't have them in 3, 4 and then send them over to Ward 32 because Ward 32 is represented by Judge Z and he has court the same day as Judge A. So I can't have them trying to crisscross the city trying to get to hearings. But yes, the first line is the district judge office, and the judges either dismiss it, find them guilty, give them a continuance, or whatever the case may be, fine them, and then they have the opportunity, they have 30 days to appeal it. And appealing the case comes here. The appeals court is only here, and it's by a judge. It happens all the time. Our inspectors go through, spend 6 months, found guilty, they appeal it, bring it over here, and the judge says, well, and the $10,000 fine can turn into a $50 fine, and nothing got done. So we spend a staggering amount of time in court.
Is it okay if I point to the community resources?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
That are really helpful for people to, if you're interested in learning more about PLI. They have a monthly newsletter that I would definitely recommend that everyone get on. It is, you can go to their website, community resources, newsletter, and they also host monthly community forums down in 200 Ross Street.
Yeah, there's a just stunning presentation about city-funded demolition on there.
It's pretty good.
So I did that about 2 weeks ago.
But yeah, so I would highly recommend if you're interested or you have any interest in development or real estate or anything, building or just understanding the process better, to sign up for this newsletter to get some more information. And the community forums are also all being posted on the YouTube channel. Is that correct?
I believe so.
Yes, so you can also find them on the city channel.
Right now.
I'm sorry?
I think there's 5 or 6 under this right now, but you also said they're on the YouTube channel, the city YouTube channel.
Yep.
And that's anything, yeah.
Bird's eye view, is that on?
I'm not sure about that.
So it's on Building Eye.
Building Eye.
Which is PLI specific.
Yes, there is Bird's Eye View and there's Building Eye. This Building Eye is specifically us. And like I said, this draws real-time information from both of the databases that we use.
Any other questions?
I did bring enough cards too for everybody, so if you need anything, don't hesitate to call or email.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Mark.
You're welcome.
Wonderful.
Thank you. I really appreciate all the stuff that you guys do too. The more that you guys can take this information back to your neighborhoods and spread it around and let people know, the better job we can do. So thank you very much.
Okay, so we are going to go ahead and get started. We do have a little bit of a limited time. So I would like to welcome the Housing Authority for the City of Pittsburgh. And
How you doing?
Yeah, welcome to CLA. This is the Housing Authority's first time presenting with the Civic Leadership Academy, and we are so happy to have them, and you'll understand why. But I will pass it over to the Executive Director, Castor Binion. It doesn't amplify, it's just for the... Yeah, it's just for the video.
So, my name is Castor Binion. I'm the Executive Director of the Housing Authority of the City of Pittsburgh. We have a $167 million budget, and we serve over 10,000 residents. The first slide would say that we have almost 3,000 low-income housing throughout the city. Most of the time you don't know where it's at. In some places you do. But you're going to see some places that we have at the Housing Authority, you probably end up saying, wow. But then also you're going to generate a whole lot of questions. One of the things that we also have the Section 8 program, which we call the Housing Choice Voucher Program. We have over 6,000 residents who participate in that program. We have mixed income developments. Mixed income developments mean we would build something. We have room for low income, for working, and also for market rate. And this is a new concept because in the old days we just built public housing. What we do now, we build a mixed community. And one thing what I want to say about affordable housing in the city of Pittsburgh, as you know, the city of Pittsburgh is very progressive now. We got a whole lot of things going on, right? So what happened to the rents? The rents are going up. A lot of people are moving to the city. But what do we want here in Pittsburgh? We want everybody to enjoy the progress, but at the same time, we don't want to push people out of the city. So affordable housing is a great concept so we can maintain the greatness of the city where all citizens can participate and nobody's left behind. So we have places like, anybody seen Skyline? You seen Skyline? Okay, well we have a quick, are you seeing it? Yeah. Do it look like the old traditional public housing?
Pardon me?
Do it look like public housing? Right, so you're gonna see. Okay, but one of the things that is great about this class is that you are gonna be the people who know, you're gonna end up being the go-to person in your community. Because we understand you're getting a piece of everything, correct? And so when you sit there, somebody's gonna say, what about the fire department? What about the housing authority? What about these other entities that we have in the city? And I'm glad to see that we have an opportunity to participate. So when people say something about the housing authority and affordable housing, you can give them a conversation on both sides. You know, how the city look at affordable housing and how other people look at affordable housing. So the housing authority is, we kind of like a weird type government agency. Our charter is with the state. We have 7 board members. 5 of the board members are appointed by the mayor. I think that's what it say. And then we have one appointed by, one had to be a resident. Oh, all 7 members are appointed by, and then 5 for city council. But our money comes from all our, 99% of our money is federal money, comes from the federal government. If you heard of HUD, that's where we get our money from. And then the board hires the executive director. So the state has a charter, the mayor appoints the board, and the money comes from the federal government, and the board hires the executive director. So we're going to talk a little bit about the history of the Housing Authority of the City of Pittsburgh. Michele?
Hello, everyone. I'm Michele Sandage. I'm the Chief Community Affairs Officer for the Housing Authority of the City of Pittsburgh. Underneath my umbrella is Community Affairs as well as Resident Services. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the history. I think everybody knows this gentleman in the picture. Can you see him? That's President FDR. So he was famous for starting this whole wave of public housing back in 1937. This is him visiting a community that's called Skyline now, but it was Addison back in the day, and he's handing out the first keys to some units there. In the background, that's the mayor of the city, Mayor Scully, that's Monsignor Rice in the back, and the first residents are right in front. They're holding their children, and he is, of course, in the car passing out the keys. He came to Pittsburgh to dedicate our public housing in 1937. It started with Bedford Dwellings, Addison. They were kind of being built at the same time. Aliquippa Terrace, Arlington Heights, Allegheny Dwellings, Glen Hazel, and of course Broadhead Manor, and then later on St. Clair Village and Bedford Additions were built. So in 1960, we started with scattered site homes, and those are homes all throughout the city of Pittsburgh. probably in your neighborhood right beside you. Public housing residents live there, and they receive operating subsidy. You would not know that folks who live right beside you are in scattered sites, because we make sure that we keep, their confidentiality, and we don't want anybody to know that these are public housing residents. There's sometimes a stigma, and people tend to feel negative about public housing residents living by them, but your next door neighbor actually might be a public housing resident. And then if you can just see, in the 70s, we built a lot of senior citizen high rises. 12 of them were constructed, and we still have 11 today. In the 70s and 76, the Section 8 program was started. There are a lot of Section 8s throughout the city of Pittsburgh. You may actually live beside somebody who's in a Section 8 as well. And then we expanded the program in 1980, and in the 90s, the Hope 6 redevelopment started, and that kind of started the new look and feel of public housing and took us to where we are today. So, where are we today? We are the largest landlord, premier provider, and developer of quality, affordable housing for families, for senior citizens, and persons with disabilities. And you can see we're engaged in mixed income activity, as Mr. Binion said, in the Hill, in the East End, and on the north end of the city. So the demographic profile, if you can see that, the total family households that we serve, about 10,000. The number of individuals that we serve throughout the city are about 20,000. As I said, we are the largest landlord. LIPH, that's called low income public housing, there's 2,800. And then LIPH units in mixed income, another 1,200. Housing choice vouchers, you can see that. The average income for LIPH is $12,800. The income is a little bit higher, and I'll talk a little bit more about FSS activity. Section 8 has $12,200, and their income is a little higher for folks who participate in the FSS program.
Good evening. My name is Michele Ralston. I'm the Director of Asset Management for the Housing Authority. And tonight I'd like to talk with you about 3 programs in which the Housing Authority administers. The first program is a program that's near and dear to my heart, because that's the program that my team and I oversee, and that's the Low Income Public Housing Program. And within the Low Income Public Housing Program, there are 2 portfolios. There's a HACP owned and managed portfolio, and then there's a privately managed HACP monitored portfolio of low income public housing units, and they sit on the HACP land. Eligibility in the low income public housing program is set at 80% of area median income. So an example would be for a 2-person household, the maximum income to be eligible for the program would be $46,500. And in the LIPH program, residents pay 30% of their income toward their rent, and in some instances, residents also pay utilities. So the HACP-owned properties, as Mr. Binion had said earlier, the Housing Authority owns and operates over 2,800 units. This includes approximately 290 scattered site units, and our bedroom sizes range from studio to 6-bedroom. We have 6 family communities, and we have 11 senior and or disabled communities. And then we talked about in LIPH, that second portfolio is the mixed finance portfolio. So that's a group of low-income public housing units that are managed by a third-party managing agent. The Housing Authority provides regulatory compliance of that portfolio, and that portfolio includes 5 senior communities and 5 family communities. And the communities on the slide there are Garfield Commons and Fairmont. I don't know if anybody's familiar with either of those properties. The second program is the Housing Choice Voucher Program, HCV, or Section 8. And within the Housing Choice Voucher programs, there are 2 types of vouchers, right? So there's a tenant-based or tenant voucher, which means a tenant can take that voucher and they can go to an participating landlord and they can lease up. And there's a project-based housing assistance, and that voucher or that assistance is connected with the unit, right? And in those properties, the Housing Authority manages the waiting list. The Housing Choice Voucher Program is slightly different from an eligibility standpoint than LIPH, and that the income requirement is 50% of area median income. So for a two-person household, the maximum income would be $29,050. And again, just as in the LIPH program, residents pay 30% of their household income toward rent plus utilities. Now there is another HUD Section 8 program that you might have heard of in some communities, and that's a multifamily project-based Section 8. I want to mention that's not administered by the Housing Authority. That is actually administered by another department within HUD. And so this slide is here for you to see the geographic distribution of Section 8 Housing Choice Vouchers as of July of 2015. And as you'll see, there are vouchers in every neighborhood within the city of Pittsburgh. And here shows you the difference in eligibility criteria from an income standpoint between the low-income public housing program and the HCV or Section 8 program. Remember, the LIPH program is set at 80% of area median income, and HCV is set at 50% of area median income. Now, just because a person qualifies from an income standpoint, there are additional factors that could affect one's eligibility, right? So there's income, but things could disqualify an applicant. Things such as an outstanding balance. An outstanding balance could be attributed to rent that's due. It could be attributed to maintenance charges. It could be attributed to legal fees. So if there's a balance owed to a public housing authority or a private landlord, that could be a disqualifier. Also, criminal history could be a disqualifier. If someone had an incident with drugs, possession or sales, or violent crime, that could be a disqualifier. But in either of those instances, if an applicant feels that there are some mitigating circumstances relating to that action, they can bring that information to the housing authority and we'll review that in our decision-making process. And any applicant in either program, whether it be LIPH or HCV, if their application were to be denied, they have the right to dispute that decision via the informal hearing process. And then the last program that I'd like to share with you tonight is our Homeownership Program. And the Homeownership Program is open to anyone who's eligible for either rental assistance program, whether it be HCV or LIPH. Any participant in the Homeownership Program is required to complete a HUD ownership preparation course. And the program is pretty awesome in that it offers up to $8,000 in closing cost assistance to eligible households. It offers a 10-year forgivable soft second loan to increase the buyer's buying potential. The minimum income requirement for the Homeownership Program is $17,000 annually, and one must either be working, elderly, or disabled, and they must be able to secure a conventional bank loan. So it really is a pretty cool process. Are we taking questions? Sure.
Real quick, Roy Blankenship, Knoxville. I wanted to say about this program right here. Like, there's a lot of. It seems like you own a lot of properties that you're renting to low-income people, and the city's pressing home ownership. What is the outreach to those people that are qualified for those programs, as to moving them out of being in that low-income renter status into homeowners?
I'll defer to Mr. Binion.
Okay. So, you know, great thing about today, you have data on everything. And so what happens is that my home ownership people, what they do is they look at the data, they look who meet the requirements, and they send them letters to inform them that the home ownership program is available. Those scattered site units that we have throughout the city, I would say about 80% of them, if you live in those homes, you can purchase them from the Housing Authority if you live in those homes. So we do push home ownership, and we also maintain affordable housing at the same time.
The question that goes on top of that, like, do you feel that since you have these scattered sites and there's a lot of deteriorating housing, is it easier for Housing Authority to sort of invest in more scattered sites, or to try to just rebuild whole new developments?
Well, we basically ended up doing a combination. We work with partners for rehab. We do new homes. We take down our old traditional developments and replace them with mixed finance developments. But it's a challenge because, you know, the city, a lot of people moving into the city and the prices go up. It's a challenge. It's kind of like we're on the front line to make sure that people can stay in the city with affordable housing. And that combination, well, that could consist of all the programs she discussed, and we believe we have over 10,000 people on our waiting list, so there's definitely a need.
Yes, okay, thank you.
Okay, good evening. My name is Joy P. Carr, and I am the Director of Public Safety for the Housing Authority. Tonight, I'm just going to do like a brief overview of some of the items that we do at Public Safety, which includes our cameras and our footage request, as well as guard service, exclusion list, silent complaints, and anonymous tip lines. I also have some brochures that Molly will pass out eventually. Thank you, Molly. So that will include some additional stuff that we do at the Housing Authority. Go ahead, Chuck. So currently, we have over 800 cameras throughout the city of Pittsburgh. That includes our high-rises as well as our family communities, and they're inside and outside throughout the communities. Our cameras, we do external and internal use for the cameras. And external use, of course, is with the police, investigations, whether that's state, local, federal. But internally, we also look at garbage or snow removal. So we use them for multiple uses throughout every single day. Chuck? Thank you. The residents, of course, can ask for video footage. We don't necessarily give it to residents, we give it to the police. We encourage all of our residents to call 911, make a report, get a CCR number. I know you've already went through that at some point in your training. But we want to encourage them to get involved with the police, and then we will pull footage and work with that investigating officer, detective, whatever agency that they are involved with. We have a form, they work with their manager to go over it and to fill it out, because we need a lot of details to make sure that we capture what it entails. And then we work with the police, whether or the DA's office, we go to court on the footage. The footage is there to kind of help all the investigators. Sometimes, you know, we still need people to be able to report crime and to give information, but the cameras really supplement that activity. We have guard services throughout our communities. Currently, we have 2 companies that work in our high-rises as well as our 2 booths, which we have in Northview Heights. We have 2 welcome booths. And their goal is to ask for ID, secure access control for buildings. When they come into a building, we ask them to call up to a resident. You know, you come and see your grandma. Sometimes your grandma might not want to see you. Or there might be somebody that doesn't want a guest to come. So we do call up and say, hey, somebody's here for you. They check ID. They try to build a rapport with the community. And they monitor cameras. They also monitor the cameras. They work with the police or any agencies. If there's an incident that happens on the property, they're able to be right there and pull the video. Currently, they work on the north side 24 hours a day, and then in our other family communities and our high-rises, they're there after management leaves in the early evenings and overnight. The exclusion list, we have an exclusion list that bars individuals from our properties. If someone gets arrested on our property or adjacent to our property, they can be put on a list that we exclude them from any of our property. And it doesn't matter if they got arrested in Northview and now they want to go to Glen Hazel. They're barred from all of our property. If they're a resident and get arrested, once we go through the formal eviction and they get evicted, then we will go ahead and add them to the exclusion list for any criminal activity. We don't put you on the list if you're late with your rent and you got evicted because you didn't pay your rent. Once they're on that list, they're on there indefinitely, but after 2 years of being a good citizen, they can petition to come off the list. And there's a whole petition process which is available on our website as well as all the management offices. And when somebody goes on there, we send them a certified letter to tell them that they're on the list. And if they were to get arrested in a building or at somebody's home, we also send that tenant or the building's tenants a notice that they have been put on the list so that they're aware. All of our exclusion lists are on our HACP website, as well as in all the management office, and anybody that wants one can also request if they don't have access to a computer, and we mail them out to them as well. We also have a silent complaint form as well as an anonymous tip line. The silent complaint forms, which I have a few if you want to see them, we do one-up. We try to make sure that our residents, if you don't have a stamp, or if you don't want to hand in the form to your manager or send it from your house, we give you a complaint form. We mail them out to all residents once a year, but they're also in all the management offices that have a stamped self-addressed envelope so that if you're at the grocery store on the other side of town or wherever, you can throw it in the mailbox. Oh, you trying to throw me off? Go ahead.
No, not exactly.
Sorry.
Actually, this is a question for one of our members. I don't see him in the room. He's actually a Sudanese from, and he said that he has various friends that live in the Housing Authority's Northview section, and there's a problem with public safety for them. And I'm concerned, and we've talked to the police, but they are, from the life that they lived prior to coming to America, they're not too familiar with dealing with the authorities because maybe the regime was not right, but also they're not able to talk with the people that are there for them or quote unquote able to be there.
So we do have a somewhat solution to that. So what we've been doing is we've been working with that population in Northview. We've been having meetings. We've been working with the police. We've also created magnets because what we have found is that a lot of times the language barrier, when they call 911, they can't communicate with 911. So we have made magnets that are going to be in this magic bag, but we have made magnets in various languages so that they can put it on their refrigerator and at least do the basics. To be able to say, you know, who they are, where they're calling from, and I forget the other things once Michele pulls them out. But in addition, we're getting ready to do a mock, if you will. 911 is going to come to Northview along with the police, and we're going to get the community together and do kind of like a mock drill so that they can, so 911 can see what it's like to take their calls and they can see what it's like to give their calls and the reception. But we've been working on those magnets for a while. I'm glad to say that they are done now. So they will be going out to all of the community so that they have all the population so that they have it. So that's one thing. But we have been working with the police as well to build that relationship. You know, it's an everyday challenge.
Yeah, I know.
The language barrier itself. But
yes.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Okay, so back to silent complaint forms. They are available in the management office on the website. Like I was saying, they can go anywhere and throw that complaint into a mailbox. If they do want to give it to the manager, they can, or they can go. We have a public safety at hacp.org email address. Plus, we have an anonymous tip line. And I got to tell you about the anonymous tip line is for you, I say you because I'm not counting myself, although I know. If you remember when Bella PA was around and we had the phone system where you could go ahead and dial into the phone, but you didn't have an answering machine at your house, but somehow magically you had an answering service. That's what we have. It's way back in the day. So I don't know if you call. I can't star 69 you. I don't see when you call, so it's completely anonymous. So I tell everybody that's a good thing for you, but on the flip side, if you do not leave me your name, I can't call you back when you say, hey, I want a reply. If you don't give me enough information, I can't call you back because you didn't give me enough information to get you. So it works both ways. But you can be completely anonymous with either one of those if you wish to stay that way. But we encourage people to give us whatever tidbits that they can, because we do work with the police, with the guards, with all of different law enforcement and different agencies, probation and parole, the whole gamut to try to make it a safe community. Is that all my, oh, that's all of my stuff. Okay.
Two separate questions, but kind of linked. So the exclusionary list, an individual goes on that list and for 2 years they're ineligible to access affordable housing, does the Housing Authority of the City of Pittsburgh do anything during that 2-year period to support those individuals in clearing any hurdles that they may have? Because we ultimately know that if they're in affordable housing, more than likely they may be working more than one job. More than likely they're not going to be aware of the legal system or how to operate within the legal system. So that 2-year period could be, and more than likely probably does have a very detrimental impact on that individual and or their family. So the first question is there anything that's done during that 2-year period to support those individuals or families to get off of that exclusionary list so that they can get back into a safe environment or at least a property that they can live in?
So one thing that I guess I forgot to mention is there is a grievance period. So if somebody thinks that they've been put on the list incorrectly, or it was their twin brother, or whatever that they did that it might not have been them, or can be something that we can reevaluate, they can grieve it. There is, we do have programs that deal with expunging records. So we have that, and Michelle can talk more about it, but we have that program with Duquesne University. And we have a RSS department that works with residents. Normally when somebody's excluded, it's somebody that's not a resident. It may be somebody that, or legally not a resident. You know, they may have been staying on the property, but they're not legally a resident, but they're still eligible for our expungement program with Duquesne. And their family is eligible for the RSS programs that we do, and that's Michelle's area, so I don't want to speak too much.
And just a quick follow-up. Do we track any type of metrics, performance metrics, in terms of, so these new multi-use facilities where we have a mixed use of income properties as well as low-income properties, is there any type of tracking to understand how beneficial these properties are and how beneficial the programs are for helping these individuals get out of low-income housing and obtain equity within their property so that they can ultimately take that next step for themselves?
Oh, that's Daryl.
I'll give my little spiel in a minute, but there's all kinds of national data on how mixed income communities benefit families. I don't think we track anything specifically, but there's so much data out there that it's sort of an established fact at this point. I don't know if that kind of answers your question.
Sure. Just staying on that one more point, sorry, I'm like going on a roll right here.
Well, only thing I say about mixed finance development, you always talk about it take a village to raise a community. So in the mixed finance development, like some of our developments, you could have, and this is true, I won't make this statement, you can be verified, you can vet this statement. You could have a doctor living next door, and then the neighbor could be someone working at McDonald's. Now, that could be a single mom or a single parent, but at the same time, you know, it take a community. You see somebody doing something great, a kid sees that, and start thinking about that. So the mixed finance communities make a difference. And like there's lots of data out there. What we see when people move from our traditional public housing and move to mixed finance development, we see a difference in school records. We also, because when a kid is in a room and the room is large enough so they can sit and study and do the things they need to do, it make a difference. And then some of our programs you're going to talk about, our self-sufficiency program, when we try to improve the whole family. And we are processing data across the board and across the nation. Yes, mixed finance development makes a difference. And one of our developments, it's a lot of people say they work at UPMC. They're living in our developments where, again, you could have someone working at McDonald's and one person to live next door to them could be a nurse, a doctor, or a lawyer, or whatever. So it's a good deal.
And just one last question, I apologize. There have been massive cuts to the budget at the federal level for HUD. So can before you sit down, can you just explain to us or tell us a little bit about how that is going to impact your organization in the city of Pittsburgh?
Well, one thing good about the city of Pittsburgh, we have a great housing authority. I didn't miss that. Okay. So we have found creative ways to work with partners, foundations, and other people to provide affordable housing in the city of Pittsburgh. For example, we have a program. You want to talk about choice? Oh, okay, let him talk first, okay?
Well, who's next?
Okay, all right.
This is next, then I'll go after her. I'll get that.
So you asked about the programs and services, so I'm just going to go through the programs and services, but I am going to ask you this question. So ask me what my favorite lyrics are for my favorite song that kind of talks about public housing. Well, I'm glad you asked me. So, it's Luther Vandross' I'm Not Meant to Live Alone, Turn This House Into a Home. Because remember, a house is just four walls, but what we do at the Housing Authority is we don't let people live alone. We have programs and services. The village concept is very, very viable. We have seniors, we have persons with disabilities, we have a large immigrant population as well. And the other thing is that there are four walls, but we try to make sure what's happening inside of the home is just as beneficial as your new home, because if you don't, it's just a house, okay? So these are some of the resident services. As you can see, we invest more than $2 million a year in resident services. So the Family Self-Sufficiency Program, it's called FSS. This program is a voluntary program. I'll talk more about it, but it does program service coordination. We do specialized training. We have Section 3 and resident employment. Right now, year to date, there are 137 residents who have been employed through this program. We have computer training and GED prep classes as well that the Housing Authority provides. So I mentioned earlier, this program is voluntary. It's a HUD voluntary 5-year program. Residents can get in this program and they can do sustainable employment in order to facilitate some upward mobility. And clients and residents work together with a thing that's called a contract of participation, and they also get tracked as it relates to their progress through these individual training and services plans. Now, I'll share a secret with you if you promise it doesn't go any further than this room. Did I get a couple nods here? Okay. Oh, well, wait, we're on YouTube. Yeah, and I don't want to speak in the mic. So this program has an escrow component to it. What happens is when residents participate, if you come in and your rent is $100 and all of a sudden you start to elevate yourself as it relates to employment, and now all of a sudden your rent goes up to $500. We keep the 100. The other 4 goes into your escrow program, and that, yeah, you're shaking your heads like you're going to tell the secret. And that helps you so that if you do that for 5 years, you have a nice little nest egg to get into our Homeownership Program to be able to purchase a home. It's a HUD federal program. We're very proud of it, and right now 13 people this year have purchased homes.
Good job.
Thank you. So we talked a little bit about workforce development. Like I said, we have on-site GED activity, computer training, construction and skilled training programs with a couple of entities in the city, Mentors Community Empowerment Association, as well as Trade Institute of Pittsburgh. We have our home health aid activity. We have free, my favorite 4-letter word, driver's education for residents. Right now, we have about 32 people who are enrolled, and this year to date, about 21 residents have obtained driver's licenses. So, of course, this enables folks to be able to, look for better employment, be able to get to, school activity and whatnot. So we're really proud of that. Investing in youth. So as we said earlier, we have about 7,700 youth. You see 5,800 are in HCV and 1,900 are in our public housing area. We house about 750 children, 0 to 5, so we have a lot of children. And we partner with a number of outside entities that provide services and programs, for our residents free of charge. One of them is the BJWL after-school program, and that's for children ages 6 through 17. Earlier we said we were working with Duquesne University, 2 initiatives. One is this early childhood learning center, which we're doing. Non-traditional hours as it relates to daycares, childcare, so that way if you're working the graveyard shift or you're working a Saturday or Sunday, you'll be able to drop your children off. So we're looking forward to kicking that off. And the other thing that's in place is JRAP, and that is our Juvenile Reentry Program with Duquesne University. I think you asked the question about what we do, and so we will refer residents to this program. It's a free, service that Duquesne provides. Now, this says ages 24 and under. That is our program, but the law clinic will take adults as well, so they do it all. So we invest in residents in a number of ways. I think I told you education is one of the key things that we do. We have a scholarship program. It's called Clean Slate E3. That stands for Educating, Entertaining, and Encouraging Positive Lifestyles. Year to date, we've given out $140,000 in scholarship funds to more than 40 students. We have a partnership with Need, and that matches our activity, as well as Pepsi. And then I also told you, and I think the other Michelle told you about our Homeownership Program. As you can see, over 100 families over the years, the past 10 years, have purchased homes through that program. So this picture is Northview Heights. Our residents participate in a number of programs. This one is Grow Pittsburgh. We have, like I said, invested a lot of money in programs and services, and these are our dollars. We do things with the Allegheny County Health and Human Services, the Area on Aging, Matilda Tyson, UPMC, BJWL, as I said. We have Reading is Fundamental and Youth Places, and all of these people show up, and either we subsidize them or they provide services for free. Any questions? Yes, you have a question.
Hi, my name's Eric, and I actually represent Marshall Shaitlin here, but I have a couple questions.
Okay.
Really, two questions, and I hear you use the example of McDonald's versus the doctor moving in. It doesn't seem to me that it would be so much of an issue for the kid or the person who works at McDonald's to live there as it would be for the doctor to want to live next to the kid who works at McDonald's. So how do you get that person to buy in? Because I hear what you're saying, yes, that there's facts and it can be vetted and checked that this does benefit them. But it seems like there's more of a fear on the people who are more affluent that you're going to bring my child down and make my child less of the person he's supposed to be than them caring that my child is going to, or I'm going to influence your child and your family to come up and strive more. So how do you get them to buy into that? That's my first question.
Well, good job. What happens is that most of the people, professionals I'm talking about, these are young professionals who move into the community. They have not, most of them probably haven't started their family. They have moved to Pittsburgh. They're working. They have a type of personality, philosophy of life that allows them to move in that community and be able to blend in and work with their neighbors. So it works out pretty good. Yeah, you have a choice. These are the market rate units, because you could have one unit that somebody might pay $30 rent for the same type of unit, but a market unit that right next door you could be paying $1,100. And so that's just a choice. But I have to tell you, on our market rate units, people are standing in line trying to get in. So it's a choice.
Okay, and that makes sense to me because
Right.
we do live in a different time now where people are more accepting, I believe, of each
Right.
other than even what you may think on the news that's happening. That people
Right.
are more accepting. So I understand that, and I do believe that.
Okay.
So my second question, though, is there was a time when people were not as accepting, and they moved away. And I don't know where you guys are from, but I'm from Pittsburgh, and the Hill District has a special place in my heart because, and it should throughout any resident of Pittsburgh and throughout this nation, really, because there's a rich African American history in the Hill District. So now the people who were forced to live in that section of town when it came to that point, and they've built their families and their homes, and I'm looking at this skyline and I'm thinking, oh, this is beautiful, but now you're pushing mixed housing or units and bringing other people in. What happens to those families who don't want to move out or who want to come back, but because you want it to be a mixed income unit, they can't come back into their homes? That bothers me.
Okay, so one thing you don't know, that when we do start demolition process, we have relocation, and families who probably live in the old Addison, they all had the opportunity to come back, and we pretty successful on it. But I will go on record and say that Addison had a whole lot of one-bedroom units. We did not bring lots of one-bedroom units back, but for the first phase, we have 4 phases of Addison. I think that when we got ready to take it down, we had 513 units. All the families who want to come back, we have a phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3, and we're in the process of doing a phase 4. All the families that, now I'm not talking about one-bedroom families, 2 to 4, I don't think we have any 5s, 2 to 4, all those families that wanted to come back, they was able to come back. And then when you talk about choice neighborhood, you're going to talk about it in a minute, is over there in East Liberty, all that building stuff we do in East Liberty, and we took down some places, all those families have the right to come back. You always have the right to come back. But generally, nationwide, for some reason, you only get probably about 70% of people come back.
One more question. Okay, the one-bedroom families who were not able to come back, I'm just going to ask you guys, do you think that that's fair that you decided that we're not going to have one bedrooms, so you have to get out? And also and this is the last one, I promise, okay. This is the last one. The value, if anyone's never seen the skyline, that part of town or part of Pittsburgh, that land is probably much more valuable and appeasing than definitely. It is if you move me to East Liberty, to the nicest part of East Liberty, it's not going to be as beautiful as a view of that skyline there. So is that fair?
Well, I'm not going to get into fairness. What I'm going to say is that everyone who we move out, they were able to be relocated, which in some of the properties that we already have, or they received Section 8 vouchers, and they could move where they wanted to go to. I think that we worked this out pretty well. I think we got a balance. I don't think we really got any challenge, but I think it was a challenge with the one bedrooms. But traditionally, and you try to accommodate families, elderly, and I think that's what we ended up doing. But I really think that we did a good job in relocating people who need a one bedroom.
Thank you very much. All right, my turn.
Michelle, I think she had a question for you. Sorry, just before you get up.
Either or Michelle or anyone who's up there. Real quick, yesterday I was at a community meeting in Sheridan. Molly was there. And the topic of Section 8 came up. And actually, I believe a gentleman from one of your departments, Knowledge, was there, and he was very knowledgeable. He was able to respond to a lot of the residents' questions, but some of the issues that came out, at least in my opinion, were more of a complaint about Section 8 and the people with living in those Section 8 housing in Sheridan, Wind Gap, Chartier City. Well, I can't even say Chartier City. I'm not sure. In Sheridan, most of them are maybe scatter sites over there. Don't know. But I don't think a lot of people understand some of the things that you just talked about, like the scatter sites, some of the eligibility for Section 8. Is it a possibility for Knowledge or someone else to come back over to that community and give this presentation? Because there's a lot of misconception about some of the people who are living in those properties. Now, there are some people, trust me, who are not taking care of their living space, but there are some other people who are doing a great job, but they're just being painted a broad brush just to say that everyone in Section 8 is basically not doing what they're supposed to do.
Okay, so first let's talk about scatter sites. Scatter sites are houses that are owned by the Housing Authority. We have a great relationship on that side of the town, and especially your Councilwoman Smith. She keeps me in check. really. So you need to tell her that. So she definitely would talk to me. So on our scatter sites, with houses that we have, you don't know which is which. And we kind of like, if everybody cut their grass on Monday, the people who live in our scatter site housing, they would cut their grass. You blend into the community. And one thing I say about scatter sites is it's based upon, to be selected for scatter sites, you have to be elderly, disabled, or you have been working for 2 years. Because one thing about it, if you're in a single house, as you know, it takes money to cut your grass and all that kind of stuff. And so what we find out, people who, for the working, they're able to maintain their houses and they blend into the community and everything works out well. There's lots of times that when someone would pass away, somebody would say, who's going to get the house? That means that families been living there for a long time and no one ever knew those houses belong to the Housing Authority. Now, as far as Section 8, the Section 8, I have two ways I can say about Section 8. One, we cannot tell you which houses they are, but Councilwoman Smith, she, if you call her, she would contact the Housing Authority and we look into it. If they belong to if it's a Section 8 property and we find something wrong, only thing we can do is stop payment. But I have to tell you, for every 15 calls that's called in that you think is Section 8, it's probably 2 of them was a Section 8. Because we have inspection requirements, and if somebody can make a complaint, we will go out, and if there's problems, we will terminate that resident from the program, and then landlord might let them stay there. And we have lots of that situation on that side of town. But
and that's what I'm saying.
Right.
The possibility for knowledge to come.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And maybe go over this with some of the members that.
He will.
And to Knowledge's credit, he goes to the Sheridan meetings monthly.
Right.
Now, the past couple months,
so we
and I
will
think he
have him.
intends to.
I will have him back there next month. Okay. All right. One more.
Just to follow up on that question, she was talking
about misconceptions about Section 8. Could you address those? Because a lot of people have those, and it's really tinged with racism. And could you just address that directly?
Okay, so I don't know how many people are in the city. I probably have that data somewhere, but we have Section 8 is 6,000, roughly 6,100 residents that live in Section 8. And in any situation, you're going to have some things going to be great and some things going to be okay. The ones that you might have a problem with, you can call the Housing Authority, we can look into it. But Section 8 is a opportunity for low-income people who need a place to stay but do not make enough income to be able to compete with the raising rent in the city. But we take Section 8 very serious, and the landlords who is not supporting our program or supporting the city program or not trying to be a good neighbor, we have situations to take care of them. But the thing about it, I can stop payment to the landlord, but we can take the tenant off the program. If the tenant can find a way to pay the landlord, they're still going to stay in your community. What have happened in Pittsburgh for a long time, people left Pittsburgh. Lots of people left Pittsburgh. And when they left, their parents probably were staying in the house. And then when their parents went on to another place, the kids did not come back home and take possession of the houses. And so this is the type of situation we're in. The kids who you knew in grade school, they moved to somewhere else, they end up getting a house, and they quit paying the taxes on the house, and the house is there. Or they tried to rent the houses, but they live somewhere else. But I think that as a team, Pittsburgh, with city government, we're trying to work that. But that's the reality. So the story of Section 8, if you have any complaints, call the Housing Authority and we will look into it. Or call your council person.
More about Section 8.
For the last one. Yeah. What's the what's city number? 411? City number? 411? Oh, I'll call 311. Okay, last.
Years ago, which is probably 10 years ago, when I was new to this country, And then we applied for what we call live in Lawrenceville for a long time, maybe since 2004. And then we applied for housing, and it didn't work out, so we later applied for Section 8. And then we did it for like years, and then finally, my mom had to come to the office, and it's like, come on, guys, this is now, I need somewhere, and then I need Section 8. And then it went for like a month, we finally got into, and then the landlord raised the price compared to whatever they're living in the neighborhood. And then she went back and saying, you know, I can't afford this, and only she don't work. My dad probably worked just like, he doesn't even speak English, so he just worked in an inter-level job, like make $8 an hour, which is probably like $15,000, $20,000 a year. So my mom went back there and it's like, well, we can help you with this house. We pay you what we can pay. We pay what we can. You can move out of the place, go whatever else you want to go. But she's comfortable whatever she live in. And then the landlord is okay, and the neighborhood is really great. This Lawrenceville was not bad, but right now it's crazy. And that happened with my parents. And then later, myself, I'm a landlord in the same situation. I have 2 seniors people live in my house, and then I have a house in Sharpsburg, which is it's not the city, it's in the county.
I can't address that.
Right, but they still a Section 8. They still in Section 8, and my house get inspected, pass it every 2 years. But same thing, I was getting underpaid for just me having him in there. Because if I rent, it's a whole house. If I rent, it's $900 a month, but I'm only getting paid $600, which is okay. I'm willing to help. And then another year I came by, I said, oh, they actually drop it down. And I was like, I can kick these people out, but where are they gonna go?
I think you can talk to me after the meeting.
Okay.
Okay, I think it's like a one-on-one conversation.
All right.
All right. Good evening, finally. My name is Daryl Davis. I am the Chief Development Officer at the Housing Authority. And before I throw a bunch of numbers at you, just a quick word about how I got here. I came from the Canton Housing Authority, and I had a pretty good gig there. I was doing some pretty good stuff, just getting it off the ground. And when they contacted me about this job, I was thinking, well, you know, I got a lot of stuff here I hadn't finished yet. I'm not really sure I want to leave to take on something new. And this gentleman called me up and he said, well, why don't you come down and have a conversation? I guarantee, he said, it never hurts to have a conversation. So he said, you know, some of the things we're doing here, I think you'd be quite interested in. I said, okay. So I called around, checked on him. And one of my friends who's sort of an authority on affordable housing all over the country told me, man, if you don't consider that opportunity, you are an idiot. He said, they are doing things in Pittsburgh that have never been done anywhere in the country before. He said, at least go take that interview. And so I came up here, and actually, I don't even know if I told you this part. The test they gave me told me this is where I wanted to be. Because I looked at some of this stuff and said, I didn't even know you could do that. So some of the stuff going on here, they've created all kinds of new programs. They've taken a very complex set of federal, state, and local rules and blended them into something that we could use to build affordable housing for the future. So that's just a little bit about some of these numbers I'm about to throw at you real quick. So what we do is we create sustainable, viable, mixed income communities. That's pretty much the basics of what we do. We have leveraged over $400 million of public and private resources, our own investment of $321 million for over $700 million worth of development that we have brought to the city of Pittsburgh. And you can see some of the before and after that we've done in some of the communities that we've already talked about. Now, somebody asked a question earlier about these funding cuts that we're looking at in housing. And I am very fortunate to be working at a housing authority that was forward thinking long before I got here. Because one of the things that they started doing was putting in place self-development. And what typically happens in mixed income communities is the housing authority will fund this project, a developer will come in and they'll actually build all this stuff. They'll walk away with that nice development fee and they'll be collecting the rents for the next at least 15 years, sometimes 30. Well, somebody looked at that and said, well, wait a minute, we know how to do this stuff. We've been doing this stuff just as long as they have. Why are we letting them walk away with all the fees? So what we started doing was we started self-developing. We created a separate entity to actually take this public money to go out and build these new communities where we take the developer fee, we take the rents, and we take it and build more affordable housing. Choice neighborhoods. We are, correct me if I'm wrong, but we are the only city in the country that has gotten 2 separate choice awards. One for East Larimer, one for the Hill District. The East Larimer is an implementation grant of $30 million, which we use to leverage a whole lot more. And the second one is a planning grant for the Bedford Hill District on the Hill. The other part, that's for our development department. We're actually 3 departments under my purview. One is development, one is modernization. Our modernization department takes care of all those properties that he talked about that we own. We have to keep those in working condition until we can get around to redeveloping them. And that can be, public housing, we all know the way it was built back in the 40s and 50s, so that can be a daunting task, but we have a dedicated team who has, and you can see this is actually under construction, so it looks a little more cluttered, but we've actually done some excellent renovation jobs on some of the properties that we own. One of the things that Mr. Binion bragged about before he brought me here was that our DevMod capital program has achieved 16 straight years of 0 audit findings. And if you have ever seen the paperwork that it takes to do a modernization job, you would know that is an incredible task. Some of the different things, we've taken some pretty old houses and we fixed them up to make them look, to make them blend more into the community, to make them look more like their surroundings. This here is that road going to Northview. That is actually a PennDOT quality road that we actually made the investment in because all the traffic going up and down that hill put a wear and tear on that street. And our technical team, we are fortunate to actually have our own technical team, people with architecture, engineering backgrounds, who help us actually accomplish some of this work. Because that can actually be one of the most expensive parts of doing some of the work that we do, hiring all the architects, engineers, and those kinds of things. So we're fortunate enough to have our own department that does our cost estimates, bid analysis, and deals with a lot of the contractors that we have come in and do this work. So let me address just a couple of things that I heard while I was sitting here. Number one, you asked a question, I believe, about the scattered sites. Is that right? Executive directors love scattered sites a whole lot more than development people do, because one of the realities of scattered sites is we can buy a house and we can put a family in there, and that part is wonderful. But in order for me to go in and fix a house, the cost is going to be 2 to 3 times sometimes what it would take a private person to go in and fix that, because we have federal prevailing wage. We have to bid out. We have the 4 prime rule in Pennsylvania, where we have to bid out the 4 prime separately. We have all of these different rules make it extremely complicated to renovate these houses when they're at the end of their useful life. He actually came to me the other day with a problem I think is going to fix that. So you might end up seeing some more scattered sites.
And I don't mean to cut you off. As a developer, I understand you're supposed to be a great salesman for that point, but as a concerned community citizen and long-term investment with 14 children in Pittsburgh, I do believe that a lot of the housing here that we have, we're in PLI and they'll tell you about it. There are still a lot of homes that have great structures that are still able to be worked with, and I think Housing Authority with your programs, I mean, wouldn't it be lucrative for you guys also, because home ownership would be at the end of all of that also?
But I mean, all of those things are wonderful, and when we have the funds to do those kind of things, we will. But the fact remains that it costs me a heck of a lot more to fix up that house than anybody in town can go in and fix up a house cheaper than I can because of all the federal government regulations that we have to work through. When you build a building, you can take those costs and spread it out over 50, 75, 100 units. When you're working on one house, those costs will they continue to drive the price higher. Yeah.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. I know we are looking at some programs in the future, but one thing that I find out is that there are lots of contractors in the city who rehabbing houses, and because of our home ownership program, we're able to purchase those houses because, you know, under the federal government, everything I do is very expensive because of the law, lawyers and all that kind of stuff. But the bottom line is, 13 houses that were purchased by residents this year, you know, using our program, they range from $80,000 to probably $130,000. They were rehab houses, and they're great houses. And so there is a market in this city for this, for housing, for single housing, for home ownership.
On top of what you just said, I understand that dealing with the federal government on that aspect of development and I guess new development. What I've seen from what I'm currently in the model of what we're doing now is we're actually putting local contractors to work, and we're sort of like stimulating the community empowerment, shall I say. There's a lot of positive that's growing out of it, and it's just on a small scale because we don't have the budget, but I do believe my organization, they have like that, they found that happy medium. So
I want to address just a couple other things that I heard around the room here. And I know we talked, you asked about the fairness of bringing back one bedrooms to the community or whatever. One of the biggest problems that I face as a developer is the stigma in the community about the type of housing that we build. On the Hill right now, I'm fighting that fight. They don't want one bedroom. They don't want apartment buildings. They want townhouse, they want single family homes. I can tell you the cost for those is going to go through the roof. And here's something that I think a lot of people don't realize. Home ownership stabilizes a community. We can all agree on that, right? But how do you get to stabilization? Now, there are some communities in Pittsburgh who are thriving and whatever. A lot of them are not. Home ownership doesn't turn a community around. Rental does. Quality rental units is what turns a community around. Think about it this way. If you build 25 houses, how long is it going to take you to sell all 25 of those houses? Folks are going to start moving in one by one, and if the community is a troubled community, they're going to look and say, oh, I made a mistake. Some of those people are going to leave before you even get the community filled when you're in a troubled community. When you build rental housing, quality rental housing, you take out a whole block. People come in and they look out for each other, and then you start building out from there. That's what happened in East Liberty. That's what's happening on the Hill. So while everybody is talking home ownership, which is a great thing, a wonderful thing, it's actually rental housing that turns a community around, quality rental housing. And I'll say this, the product that we're building right now, and I just moved to Pittsburgh, so I've been looking in every neighborhood in this city to try to find suitable housing. The units that we are building right now, I will put up against any developer in the city in terms of quality. Any one of them.
Well, I was just more concerned along the development of, as you said, with the when comes mixed housing, as the gentleman just said over here, Eric, you don't service the full demographic of people that might be displaced, and they're going to be moved in vouchers to other neighborhoods. Like, I live in Knoxville, which Knoxville, if anybody knows that community, we're all residential housing. There's no business district, but we have over 200 and something homes that are vacant. So when you're looking at a demographic like that, St. Clair Village closed, which all of those people were displaced out of there, and a lot of them didn't have nowhere to go. They moved into houses around the neighborhood and got rentals. But I was just hoping that there was some type of demographic you guys would think of for communities like mine, because in Pittsburgh we have about 6 or 7 of them that are like Knoxville, where it's residential, there's no actual business district right there, and there's just housing stock and homes just sort of like sitting there.
Just one quick note on relocation and displacement. First of all, I mean, displacement is kind of a fact of development. But I can tell you that public housing residents have more protections than anybody else. I live in a pretty decent building right downtown, and all it would take is for some developer to come in and go, I can double the rents on those units. I get a 60-day notice, and that's it. I got to find someplace else to live. Public housing residents do not face that threat. When we tear down a public housing community, we have to relocate all those people. And that's one of the big costs. When you look at all the, newspaper always wants to run these stories about how expensive affordable housing is. Well, that's one of the reasons. We have to consider the cost of relocating every single family in that development to a new location.
So, okay, I'll get your question then. We might have to wrap up and take other questions. Yes, ma'am.
It was for the gentleman before. I just wanted to know what your vision was for development going into the future, the next 10, 15 years. I'm coming from the energy sector, so I want to know how you're going to do maybe sustainable housing, bring in some of the newer technologies, so on and so forth.
I would say that we believe in technology and some of the new stuff we have. We have some dynamic stuff that's going in East Livery as far as green. I mean, he just got here, so I don't know he know much about that this time. But we are embracing technology and also sustainable housing using green type technology. But what I want to say before we go and take some other questions, the success of Pittsburgh as far as affordable housing is what I call Team Pittsburgh under the leadership of our mayor. We have URA as partners, we have the foundations, we have the community groups, we have lots of people. This just does not happen with the Housing Authority. We have partners, and the partners are you in the community. So as you go out into your community and you talk about affordable housing, you know you got a friend on your side that looking to have affordable housing here in the city. Is there any other questions? We're going to show one 30-second clip.
This is affordable housing. This is affordable housing? Yeah, this is affordable housing. This is affordable housing. This is affordable housing? As Pittsburgh continues to grow, so does our need for safe, accessible, affordable housing. Pittsburgh's disabled individuals and our low-income working families also deserve the right to be included in our city's renaissance. Top-notch new affordable housing is currently being developed in communities like Skyline Terrace and Larmer, East Liberty. Senior citizens and disabled individuals have access to affordable communities like Morse Gardens and The Legacy. HACP is committed to building better communities in Pittsburgh and helping to meet the growing need for affordable housing. We are Pittsburgh's premier provider and developer of quality, affordable housing. Find out more about the HACP at www.hacp.org or follow us on Twitter at HACP. You can visit our website, www.hacp.org, or you can follow us at Twitter. On Twitter, HACP1.